Hello, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to our channel, Unisonofgeekshow. My name is Sanskriti, and today I'm going to give a book review and summary of the of Time Machine by G.Wells. So let's start. Okay. So summary is follows: experiments in the fourth dimension. The time travels six with his friends, including the unnamed narrator, discussing the nature of time as the fourth dimension. He believes people should be capable of moving around in time as they do in the other dimensions. Indeed, the time travel says he now has, by experimentation, proven that a man can travel back and forth in time. When his friends demand to see the experiment, the time traveler goes to his laboratory and returns with a miniature machine. He points to two levers on the machine, explaining that one sends to the device into the future while the other sends it into the past. The time traveler asks one of his guests to press one of the levers, and the machine vanishes amid a small gust of wind. The machine, the time traveler explains, is now headed to the future, but so fast that the members of the group can't perceive it. He then leads his guests into the laboratory, where he shows them a full-size version of the machine. Though the guests feel sure that time traveler is playing some kind of trick on them, the man insists he is deadly serious. He plans to use the machine to explore time. 1 week later, the narrator returns to the time traveler's house for dinner. Some of the guests from the previous meetings are present, as well as some new faces. They find a note saying to go ahead and start dinner. The time traveler will explain when he returns. The group is in the middle of the meal when the door of the dining room opens and the time traveler appears. He is in a shocking state, dirty, pale, and limping. The time traveler gulps down some champagne, then goes to clean himself up. While he is gone, the guests speculate on what he's doing. The narrator remarks that it's probably something to do with the time machine. The time traveler returns, begins to eat, and then confirms he had indeed been traveling in time, but he won't say more until he is done with dinner. After dinner, in the smoking room, the time traveler states that he will tell the group what happened, but only if everyone agrees not to interrupt the story. The guests agree, and the time travel begins his tale. As soon as his machine was ready, as it was at 10 o'clock that morning, the time traveler sat inside and pushed the state lever forward and then almost immediately pulled the stop lever. Looking at his laboratory clock, he was amazed to see 5 hours had elapsed. Again, he pressed the start lever. The laboratory became extinct as the time travel moved into the future. He felt dizzy as nights and days passed swiftly. Soon the lab itself disappeared and the time travel found himself outdoors. Building rose and fell, the time travel's model transformed to one of heedless elation. As the years passed, however, his fear began to grow. For a moment, the time travel became uncertain and he would never be able to stop, so he decided he should stop immediately. He yanked the stop lever and was abruptly flung off the machine. The time traveler found himself in a garden in the middle of the storm. He noticed a white stone statue of Sphinx on the bronze pedestal and began to worry anew about what sort of world he would discover. What if people had become savage and inhuman? Feeling a new stab of fear, the time traveler rushed to his fallen time machine, and as the rain had stopped, turned it upright once more. Suddenly, he saw a group of robed figures. One of them, a beautiful, delicate creature, roughly 4 feet tall, approached him. Others followed. They spoke to the time traveler in a lovely language that he didn't understand. The Biggins didn't seem to fear him at all. Feeling more secure, the time traveler removed the control levers from his machine. Rendering it inoperable, he attempted to explain where he came from. He pointed to the sun, and one of the creatures, noticing, made a noise like the sound of thunder. The time traveler realized, to his dismay, that the creature thought he came from the storm. He wondered if perhaps the little people were fools. He had always expected future generations to be far advanced. This group seemed to suggest otherwise. The creatures covered the time travel in flowers and led him to a lovely, though worn building inside. He ate a strange fruit the creatures gave him and tried to learn the language. They find his questions amusing at first, but soon grew tired of teaching him. After eating, the time traveler went back outside to explore the world of 802-701 AD. The time traveler saw the number of ruins and noted the only standing structures appeared to be large castle-like buildings. There were only no single homes. He thought of communism. Looking at the group of creatures following, he noticed there seemed to be no difference between male and female, and no signs of age or disease. Everyone wore the same style of clothing. He considered how these things might make sense. Without hardship or danger, humanity no longer needed male or strength or female gentleness. If no longer required intelligence or ingenuity or passion, cooperation would rule and toil would end. And eventually, having achieved these heights, society would begin to slow in decline as the mindless yet lovely creatures showed. However, the time traveler explains to his listener in the present, these initially theories would prove ultimately incorrect. Back in the future, night began to fall and the time traveler walked back to its time machine. As he drew nearer, he saw it wasn't here where he had left it. He knew no one could have moved the machine in time. He still had the levers in his pocket, so the little people must have hidden it somewhere. As he ran around the grounds, he startled a white creature that ran away into the night. He returned to the hall where he had eaten earlier, and waking the creatures found sleeping here, demanded to know the location of his machine. They merely looked at him confused and afraid. At last, he returned to the Piscean statue, and after much weeping and cursing, fell asleep on the ground. The next morning, the time traveler's rationality returned. Examining the glass closely, he saw drag marks and concluded that someone had placed the time machine inside the statue's bronze pedestal. When he tried to ask the creatures how to open the pedestal, they reacted to a mixture of surprise and disgust. Seeing no way to open the pedestals himself, the time traveler decided he must be patient. He resolved himself to get to know the creatures better and explore the world more thoroughly. As the time traveler walked out, he noticed not just the natural beauty of the place, but the many walls that appear at the dot the landscape. From within, he thought he heard machine-like sounds and noted the wells appear to be sucking air down into the earth. He concluded they may be kind of ventilation system, but for what purpose? Other questions presented themselves. If the little creature didn't work, where did their clothes and shoes come from? Later day, the time traveler saved one of the creatures from drowning in the river. Her name was Veena. After the rescue, Veena became devoted to time traveler, following him everywhere. She is afraid of dark like others of a kind. This is why they all slept together in one room in the great buildings. One morning, the time traveler woke up before sunrise. Looking out the hand, he saw ghostly figures moving around. On his fourth morning, the time traveler took refuge from the sun in one of the ruins. Inside, he found himself face to face with one of the pale creatures. He was able to note its gray red eyes and long blonde hair as the ape-like creature fled. The time traveler tried to follow, but it disappeared down one of the strange wells. Pondering this new mystery, the time traveler deducted that society had divided into two species, one which lived above the ground and one which lived below. He then theorized that the underground race was the final result of widening gap between capital and labor, which had already made its own time. The underground creatures, known as Morlocks, were the laborers, he reasoned, who the rich must have forced underground at some point in history. They would have no choice but to keep working for the overlanders, or else there is starvation or suffocation. In short, the ease of Veena and her people called the Eloi was not the result of society's trump over nature alone, but also the trump of one class society over another. But why had the Morlocks taken the time machine? And why, if the Eloi were ruling class, why they were afraid of nightfall when the Morlocks emerged? The more he considered the situation, the more certain the time travel became. The recovering this time machine hinged on venturing into the world of Morlocks. He feared taking the step. One day as he was walking, he noticed a building which he dubbed the Palace of Green Porcelain. Though he wanted to visit it, he decided he would first go into one of the wells. The time traveler kissed Veena goodbye and began to descend despite her protest. He climbed down until he thoroughly exhausted himself. Finding a small ledge where he could pause, the time traveler rested. Suddenly, he felt clammy hands touching him. Lighting a match, the time traveler saw a number of mortals running away down a tunnel. He followed them to a massive chamber where he saw a table with large piece of machine kind of meat sitting on it. The Morlocks themselves lurked on the edge of the light at a time travel match cast. All at once he realized that he only had 4 matches remaining, and each time a fire dried out, the Morlocks grabbed at him. He began to go back where he had come. He almost completed his escape when the last of his matches went out. The Morlocks attempted to seize him, but he managed to scramble up the shaft unharmed. In light, his discretion below, the time travel revised his earlier opinion that Eloy ruled the Morlocks. Maybe once they did, but though the Morlocks still made garments for the Eloy were clearly no longer in charge. Thinking again about the palace of green porcelain, the time traveler wondered if it might be the safest place to spend the night. Carrying Veena on his shoulder, he began to walk forward it. At one point during the journey, Veena climbed down and walked beside him, picking up flowers, putting them into his pockets. In the present time, the time traveler pauses in his story to his dinner guest, reaches into the pocket and produces two blooms, which he places on the table in front of his guest. Back again in the future, the trip took far longer than planned, and the night fell. Veena and the time traveler found themselves at the edge of the forest. Afraid to venture inside without light, the time traveler let Veena sleep while he kept watch. In the middle of the night, it suddenly came to him with horror that the meat the Morlocks were eating was probably Eloy. The next morning, he and Veena continued walking. Once inside the palace of green porcelain, the time traveler realized that it must have been a museum. Moving through various ways, he found a hall filled with machinery. Suddenly, Veena drew close to him, and the time traveler sensed Morlocks at the far end of the dark hall. Turning to one of the machines, he broke off a lever to use as a weapon. He and Veena made their retreat. Moving through a crumbling library, the time traveler briefly mused on the time wasted in writing all the books. He found some camphor, a highly inflammable substance, and a box of matches encased in glass. He smashed the glass and took into the two directors. As a day late when the time traveler decided that they'd rather stay at the museum, he ought to head back toward the time machine. Armed with his iron bar, he might have a chance at breaking into the pedestal. The time traveler and Veena began walking, but they approached the woods. They heard the Morlocks behind them. Using the camphor and some dry bush, the time traveler started a fire to protect their backs as he and Veena made their way through the forest. They walked quickly but soon found them surrounded by Morlocks. The time traveler put down for a moment to retrieve a match from his pocket and start another fire. She fainted and the time traveler carried her to another spot. He realized that he had lost his sense of direction, so he decided to make camp. Sitting by the fire, time travel fall asleep. He woke to find the Morlocks grabbing him. He attacked them with his steel bar and killed some. To his confusion, the rest ran away. The time traveler realized that his first fire had become a raging inferno. He searched for Veena but couldn't find her anywhere. He ran after the Murlocs, hoping they would lead him out of the forest. At last, he emerged into a hillside. The Morlocks he found were blinded by the heat and light, rendering them helpless. When morning came, and after a final futile search of Veena, he continued his journey back to the statue. When he arrived, he was shocked to see the pedestal was open. Inside, the time traveler saw his machine. Though he realized this was probably a Morlock trap, he nevertheless went inside. As he guessed they would, the pedestal panels closed behind him. He pulled out a match to ward off the monster, but realized he had lost the box and matches wouldn't strike against anything else. The Morlocks attacked, but the time travel managed to get inside this machine and attach the forward lever and push it forward. The time travel hurtled even further into the future. Thousands of years flew past the time travel noticed. However, the shift from night to day appeared to be happening more slowly. He saw the sun grew larger and redder. At last, the earth seemed to stop turning altogether. The time travel brought the time machine to halt. In the twilight of the time sun, the time traveler looked at the strange landscapes surrounding the beach he had landed upon. The earth was covered in lush greenery, the air was thin. In the distance, he saw something look like a giant white butterfly. A clump of what he thought was a red rock then began to crawl toward him. It was a massive crab like creature. And the time travel started. Another creature approached him from behind the bush, back of his neck. He quickly pushed the lever forward and jumped a month further into the future. But now he saw dozens of the crab creatures on the beach. Horrified, the time travel moved another 100 years ahead. Little had changed. He continued on, stopping every 1,000 years to see Earth's decay, and finally stopping 30 million years in the future. The air was bitterly cold, and sun took up a giant portion of the sky. There seemed to be nothing alive except for moss. Snow began to fall, and another planet, Mercury, he guessed, began to eclipse the sun. The sky turned black, then slowly eclipse waned. Nauseous and on the verge of collapse, the time traveler saw a round black creature splashing in the red ocean toward him. He climbed back into this time machine and started to backhead in time. After a while, the time traveler found he was able to breathe easily once again. He began to see the dim outline of a house and he slowed the machine. He recognized the landscape once more. Finally, he found himself back within the walls of his laboratory. He stopped the machine, checked the data, and hearing his guest had dinner, went to join them. He still complete. The time traveler acknowledged that he doesn't expect the guest to believe the story. They can, he states. Take it a mere speculation if they wish. If they wish, indeed, he can hardly believe himself. Staring at the flowers on the table, the time traveler wonders aloud if it was all a dream or madness. Leaping to his feet, he runs back to his laboratory to see the machine, where it sat, covered in dirt and grass. The guests leave, discussing what they have heard. The narrator can hardly sleep that night and next day rush back to the time traveler's house. He finds the time traveler in his lab, preparing to leave on another time traveling trip. The time traveler asks the narrator to wait, telling him that he'll be back in half an hour, and this time he will bring back proof of his adventure. The narrator notes that as of the telling of his story, 3 years have elapsed since the time traveler left. He wonders if the time traveler has perished or it's still wandering in time. In any case, thinking about humanity's future fate continues to depress the narrator. The only comfort as he remains is Venus' two faded flowers, prove that even when all the good and admirable has fallen away from society, tenderness will remain. About this text. So the structure and style of the time machine is a dystopian science fiction tale. G.Wells ingrained a dark future for society and grounded its idea in scientific principle and theories. The novel features a framing device wherein an unnamed narrator in the present day sets the stage for the main story, which the time traveler himself tells. Both narrators provide a first-person perspective on events. The reader never sees or knows more the men themselves and our partners in their respective journeys. At the same time, the reader relationship with each of narrator differs. The unnamed narrator provides perspective on the time traveler, encouraging readers to see the man as honest and believable when he might otherwise come across as mad. In so doing, the narrator lends weight to the time traveler story. The two narrators share a similar storytelling style and tone, both strive for objectifying when describing scenes, events, and characters. But at regular intervals, both give away to emotion or sentiment, confessing feelings of fear, confusion, disgust, and excitement. The first part of the novel introduces an unnamed narrator and the time traveler. The letter sails out the theory backing his creation of a time machine. A term Wells coined, the later claims to have actually taken a trip through time. The second part of the novel focuses on the time traveler's narration of his adventures among the beautiful Eloy and monster Morlocks in the distant future. Over the course of the story, what initially seems like a utopian age reveals itself a quite the opposite. The final part of the novel, the time travel tells of traveling still forward until he reaches the Earth's existence. And the unnamed narrator relates what happens of the time travel's return to his own era. And interpretation, in keeping with the scientific method of hypothesis and experimentation, the time travel notes when his first impression that the theories he derives from those observations prove incorrect. The place of green closely raises the question of what sorts of human achievement truly matter, as the crumbling artifacts undergo the things humanity focused their intellect upon in centuries past were useless in preventing society's decline. Wells believed that perhaps if greater attention was paid to solving social problems, human beings would have dissolved into foolish Eloy and monstrous Morlocks. Wells behaved that suspicion of disbelief was a vital of importance in speculation fiction. So that he roots the notion of time travel in scientific theory, gives the time traveler realistic emotions, and frame his extraordinary adventure with a real world setting, compromising as well as put it, all that I could imagine of solid upper class comfort. The time traveler's decision to save Veena from drowning and his appreciation of her companionship afterwards offer a counterpoint of the image of the time scientist as purely objective and unemotional. Veena can't help the time traveler recover this time machine or protect him from the Morlocks. All she can do is assuage his loneliness. Though the novel offers a clear indication of working class exploitation, it focuses on the upper classes, indicating that well message is aimed primarily at upper class readers. It is that they must change their ways, lest they doom humanity to future even more violent and divided than the present. As a force alternatively portrayed as useful or dangerous in the tale, fire symbolizes Wells' view of technology as the interrevolution short sword. Such advancements have the capacity to improve human lives, but they can also dull people's wits and serve as a tool of oppression. Pina flower act as a proof of the veracity of the time travel tale as a representation of the Eloy themselves. And for unnamed narrator as a symbol of gratitude and tenderness that society will redeem when all the good about humanity passes away. The statue of the white Sphinx is based on the mythical creature which riddles and consumes those who fail to answer correctly, represent both the time traveler's approach to the future world and the core issue of the novel how to solve labor problem before a diverse society. Historical background. The end of the 19th century in Britain was a time of great technological development and socio-economic upheaval. New industries bred mass manufacturing consumption of goods. The Irish passed for independence from England. Women agitated for the right to vote. Workers formed trade union to fight too long hours, poor pay, and dangerous employment conditions. Indeed, that the so-called labor questions with its sometimes violent clashes between factory workers and owners defied the era in many ways. While a number of laws passed during the early and middle parts of the 19th century improved working conditions somewhat, especially for women and children, social, economic, and divisions remain stark. Some within the middle of upper class believe in the necessity for further reforms to help laborers continue to improve their circumstances. Others, however, persisted in viewing the working class as purely dogfish terms that is seeing their ignorance and poverty as a manifestation of their inherent degradation. Class conflicts also coincided with evolving theories about society's relationship with both science and politics. For such of the 19th century, British culture and governance remained highly rationalized. By the century ends, the nationalization of British life and politics as well underway. While most middle-class Britonians continue to value the notion of individual responsibility and self-reliance, increased centralization help endanger a stronger belief in poverty belief as a national responsibility rather than a matter of personal conscience. A number of socialist organizations formed during this period worked likewise envisioned a new relationship between society and the state. In many ways, arguments in favor of equal opportunity for all British citizens, regardless of class, laid the groundwork for the emerging British welfare state. In literature, the question of how class conflicts would resolve them was the popular one. Utopian stories such as Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward, wherein a man wakes from a hypnotic sleep in the year 2000 discover America has become a social utopia, utterly free of class-based issue, and William Morris' News from Nowhere, which depicts the future where all work has become pleasurable, were popular in the late 19th century. Dystopian works like The Time Machine, which posit degeneration rather than continued positive evolution as mankind's future state, were a response to the utopian fiction trend. Development of the story. The earlier inspiration for Wells' notion of the above versus below ground divide between the classes which would occupy a central place in the time machine came from the author's own childhood. During the period when Wells' fathers owned a shop, the family passed much of their free time in the underground basement space. Two, at the main house of the country estate, up where Wells' mother worked as a lady's maid, Wells became familiar with the underground tunnels and living quarters where the staff passed their days. Later, when Wells became a draper apprentice, he himself spent long hours laboring in poor ventilated interior spaces. Likewise, these early experience directed Wells developing socialist ideas and another core aspect of the time machine. In his experiment in autobiography, Bell notes that his support for democratic socialism was predicated on his belief that existing political and social structures were fundamentally incompatible with scientific industrial progress. Modern science, Bell's reason pointed to the possibility of great world order that stood in direction opposite to late Victorian class barriers. So the class divide praised thwarting the possibility of truth, meritocratic competition, the outcome would be dire. Innovation wouldn't stop, but rather working to bring all people together, its effects on society would be preserved. Literacy, it's probable Wells drew inspiration from Jonathan Gulliver's travel as well as contemporary utopian works. Wells began playing the idea of time travel a number of years before writing The Time Machine. His short story, The Chronic Argonauts, which the time machine focused on the inventor who builds the time machine, was published in the Royal College of Science Students magazine. Science School Journals in 1888, Wells debated using aspects of this earlier tale on the basis of the series of the article, The Pall Mall Gazette, but was convinced by the Gazette's publisher to write a serial novel instead. The novel appeared in a serial form between January and May 1895 in the Pune Review and was published in a book form by two separate publishers, Henry Holt and Company and Henman in late May. Some of the 11 chapters of the serial, which Wells wrote merely to make his editor happy, wasn't included in the book version of The Time Machine. Today, the Henman text is generally considered the definite versions of Wells' text. Thank you for everyone. This is what we discussed, the time machine, and even you want to know more of it, please write in the chat box which book summary you want.